First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Ba'asham Yahushai, Bahasham, Rachakodash. Double honors goes to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone that rule well. Peace, blessings, and salutations goes to the elect. This is your brother Amma One from the Great Millstone Camp in Trinidad, coming back to do another lesson through the Holy Spirit and power of Yahweh Ba'asham Yahushai. And I want to do a quick lesson. The lesson is based on the wickedness of the Edomites. Alright. The wickedness of the Edomites concerning drugs in Jake neighborhoods. And this is what I typed up in ChatGPT here. I asked what university was giving crack to monkeys. And then I asked, I'm talking about in the 70s. Yeah, so I'm talking about in the 70s. So you say, if you're referring to the famous or infamous monkey drug experiments from the late 1960s and the 1970s, the answer is there wasn't exactly one university, but popularly known as giving crack to monkeys. One university popularly known as giving crack to monkeys in the 70s, but rather a series of drug addiction studies involving monkeys conducted at multiple research institutions in the US around that time. Now keep in mind the timeline here. What year did crack cocaine reach its peak? The crack cocaine epidemic in the United States occurred in the late 1980s, with many analysts identifying 1989 as the high point when crack use, availability, and social impact were at their greatest before beginning a long-term decline. Key points. Crack first became widespread in the US cities in the early to mid 1980s after its introduction around 84-85. Usage and availability rapidly increased over the decade and peaked in 89 according to several historical studies of the crack epidemic. After this peak, crack use and the intensity of the epidemic declined through the 90s as patterns of drug use changed and law enforcement and public health responses took effect. So while crack cocaine emerged as a major social issue in the 80s, its height was around 89 in terms of prevalence and impact. Now, what it was doing like 10 years, or yeah, let me say 10 years before that. Because don't sit down and feel for 1 minute that some nigga on the block went in the kitchen with baking soda and baking soda and cocaine, and put it in a pot and cook it and let it become a rock. Them thing is lab study thing, brother. Them thing is lab study. Them thing is lab scientists make that, put it on the streets, put that information on the streets. Brother, they was showing you how to make the fucking thing on the... Let me see if I get some of that on YouTube.
So, keep reading the book.
Shalom to the apostles and the elders. Yahweh Ba'asham, Yahweh Shai Ba'asham, Kakolash Prato. Some knows no one look up. My son watching this fucking set of King Zippy and certified fucking Samson. Anyways. Documentaries showing Hey, in this fucking video here, right? Some one of these videos, I don't want to use Vice, way back archives. Let me see if this will play.
Cocaine is bringing the whole world down.
Because it's killing all the people that's messing around.
It's on the back of the bill, it hasn't got we trust.
But around the corner, they made a big buck.
I heard they gave one man 5.
This is South Jamaica, Queens, a working-class community nestled between New York City's Kennedy and LaGuardia airports. There are places like it all over America. Just down the road from Archie Bunker's all-in-the-family neighborhood, South Jamaica drew middle-income blacks looking for a better life. Most people here have jobs, pay taxes, and own their homes, on blocks made for kids and
makes you insane. And crack is real whack cause it kills your brain. Creates total destruction to all that's good. Your friends, your family, and your neighborhood. It could cause a young girl to abuse her body. Make a man lose his job cause he loves to party. The lady can't sleep, cracking all night long. The little baby's going hungry cause the money is gone. So for me and Van Silk and Melly Mel and me, we're gonna help fight crack with WNBC. So don't do it. Don't do it!
Detroit drug raids increasingly turn up teenage dealers as crack becomes the drug that makes some youngsters high and others temporarily wealthy.
We've learned where people have gone to elementary school kids and offered them $1,500 to run a crack house for a week. That's a lot of money for a 14-year-old kid.
The drug trade has created new status symbols for Detroit youngsters. The beeper to
We have been studying crack since December of 1983. We have learned tremendous things. One of the things we learned is just how harmful it can be. I'm sure all of you know that crack is usually smoked in a pipe like this. What you may not know and what you need to know is that in addition to being smoked on marijuana, it is also smoked in regular cigarettes. It's important for you to know that, because if they slip these cigarettes to your children will be smoking crack and they will not know it.
This is Bill Hopkins. It is at rallies like this one in the South Bronx that this virtual one-man crusade spreads the word about crack. As a former policeman, Hopkins spent 20 years working in the streets of New York, first walking a beat, then working with youth gangs and drug addicts. It is against that background that Hopkins directs one of the country's most unusual efforts against this most unusual epidemic. He heads the Street Studies Research Unit for New York State's Drug Abuse Agency.
Good evening. Tonight we descend into a story that doesn't begin in some distant land or ancient civilization, but right here, in the fractured heart of the American dream itself. This is a tale of chemistry and capitalism, of policy and poverty, of a substance so cheap, so powerful, and so destructive that it would tear through American cities like a wildfire through dry timber. Before you settle in, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you truly value what we do here. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. This isn't a comfortable story. This is the story of crack cocaine, a small white rock that broke America. Long before there was crack, there was cocaine, and long before cocaine had a name, it was simply a leaf. High in the Andean mountains of South America, at altitudes where the air grows thin and the work grows hard, the indigenous peoples of Peru and Bolivia had for millennia chewed the leaves of a scrubby bush called Erythroxylum coca. They called it Mama Coca, a sacred leaf. It was not recreation, it was survival. The coca leaf, when chewed or brewed into tea, provided a mild stimulant effect. It suppressed hunger, combated altitude sickness, and most importantly, it allowed workers to endure the brutal, oxygen-starved labour of the high plateaus. Archaeological evidence suggests that coca cultivation dates back at least 8,000 years. Ancient mummies found in coastal Peru have been discovered with quids of coca leaves still tucked in their cheeks, preserved for millennia in the dry desert air. Ceramic vessels shaped like coca leaves, ritual offerings, and elaborate pouches for carrying the precious substance have been unearthed from pre-Columbian sites across the Andes. For the Inca Empire, which dominated the region from the 13th to the 16th century, coca was far more than a stimulant. It was a gift from Inti, the sun god himself, a sacrament that connected the earthly realm to the divine. Its use was carefully regulated by the priestly class in the emperor. Commoners were generally forbidden from chewing coca except during certain religious festivals or when performing particularly arduous labour on behalf of the state. The nobility, however, could consume it freely. It was a marker of status, a symbol of power, and an essential component of religious rituals. Priests would blow coca smoke toward the sun, make offerings of the leaves to the mountains, and divine the future by reading patterns in scattered coca leaves. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 16th century, led by the ruthless Francisco Pizarro, they initially dismissed the practice as primitive superstition, even as devil worship. The Catholic Church debated whether coca use should be banned entirely as a pagan practice. But the Spanish quickly recognized something more important than theological purity: utility. The conquistadors had discovered unimaginable wealth in the mountains of Peru and Bolivia. The silver mines of Potosi, in present-day Bolivia, were among the richest deposits ever found. Extracting that silver required an immense labour force, working in conditions that were quite literally hellish. The mines were death traps. Indigenous workers, forced into the Mitta system of compulsory labour, descended into narrow, airless shafts carved deep into the mountain. They worked in near total darkness, breathing toxic dust and fumes, hauling heavy baskets of ore up crude ladders for shifts that could last 12 hours or more. The altitude at Potosi is over 13,000 feet. The work was exhausting and deadly. Thousands upon thousands of indigenous labourers died in those mines, their bodies buried in mass graves or left to decompose in abandoned shafts. And the Spanish discovered that workers who chewed coca could labour longer, harder, and with less complaint. Coca suppressed their hunger, allowing the Spanish to reduce food rations. It gave them energy in the thin mountain air. It dulled their awareness of their own suffering. So the Spanish, despite the church's reservations, began cultivating coca on an industrial scale. They established vast plantations in the warmer Yungas valleys east of the Andes, where the coca bush thrived in the humid, subtropical climate. They distributed coca leaves as part of workers' wages, creating a system of dependency. The sacred leaf of the Inca became the tool of colonial extraction, the fuel that powered the Spanish Empire's wealth. The silver from Potosi flowed to Europe in Spanish galleons, financing wars, building cathedrals, and enriching the crown. And coca, the humble leaf that made it all possible, remained a footnote, a regional curiosity mentioned briefly in the chronicles of conquistadors and missionaries. For 3 centuries, coca remained confined to South America, known to European scientists but unexploited by them. It was described in botanical texts, filed away in the cabinets of curiosity, but it held no particular interest to the wider world. Europe had its own stimulants: coffee, tea, tobacco. The coca leaf was simply too distant, too exotic, and too foreign to gain traction. Then came the chemists. The 19th century was the age of chemistry, an era when scientists across Europe competed to isolate, purify, and understand the active principles of plants that had been used medicinally for millennia. Morphine had been isolated from opium in 1804, quinine from cinchona bark in 1820. These discoveries were not merely academic, they were transforming medicine and creating fortunes for the pharmaceutical companies that could synthesize and sell these compounds. In 1855, a German graduate student named Friedrich Gaedtke, working in his laboratory at the University of Göttingen, managed to isolate the primary active alkaloid from the coca leaf. It was painstaking work. He macerated the leaves, extracted them with alcohol, and subjected the resulting solution to a series of chemical manipulations. What he produced was crude and impure, but it was a beginning. He called it erythroxyline, after the plant's scientific name. For Gaedtke, it was an academic achievement, a successful thesis project. He had no idea of the implications. He published his findings in a minor journal, where they were noted by a few specialists and then largely forgotten. 4 years later, another German chemist, Albert Niemann, a doctoral student working under the supervision of Friedrich Wöhler at the University of Göttingen, revisited Gaedtke's work. Niemann was more meticulous, more ambitious. He refined the process, experimenting with different extraction methods and purification techniques. After months of trial and error, he succeeded in producing a pure crystalline powder, fine white crystals that dissolved readily in water and had a peculiar numbing effect when applied to the tongue. He submitted his findings as his doctoral dissertation in 1860, and he gave this new alkaloid a name that would echo through history: cocaine. Niemann's description of the substance was clinical, scientific, and chillingly prophetic. He noted its bitter taste, its crystalline structure, and most significantly its pharmacological effects. When he applied a small amount to his tongue, it produced an immediate numbing sensation, a complete loss of feeling that lasted for several minutes. This was the first hint of cocaine's potential as a local anesthetic, an application that would not be fully realized for another 2 decades. Niemann also noted, almost in passing, that the substance produced a sense of mild euphoria and increased energy when consumed in larger doses. He was describing in dry academic prose the fundamental properties that would make cocaine one of the most sought-after and destructive substances in history. Niemann never lived to see what he had created. He died the following year in 1861, at the age of just 26, likely from lung disease contracted in his laboratory from inhaling toxic fumes. His discovery, like Gedke's before him, sat dormant for nearly 2 decades. The pure white powder remained a chemical curiosity, a compound catalogued in reference books, and occasionally prepared in small batches for laboratory study, but with no clear practical application. It was another German chemist, Wilhelm Lossen, who in 1865 provided the first detailed analysis of cocaine's molecular structure, determining its chemical formula and laying the groundwork for future synthesis. But still, cocaine remained in the shadows, a solution waiting for a problem, a product